When a child loses, that car ride home can be incredibly tough. Really, it's just heavy. In this explainer, we're going to explore a step-by-step playbook to help them process that massive disappointment. Because the truth is, with the right framework, a losing day doesn't just have to be a bad day. It can actually become a really profound turning point. So what exactly do you say when your child loses? Have you ever been there? It's that heavy, agonizing moment when the results are finally announced. The crowd is cheering wildly for someone else, and you just see your kid utterly crushed. Suddenly, the moment feels so much bigger than the event itself, right? As supportive adults, we often scramble in our heads for the perfect words, desperately wanting to just instantly erase their pain. All right, let's jump right into section 1, when the scoreboard hurts. This is our first phase where we really focus on immediate emotional triage right after the performance concludes. Now listen, we absolutely must avoid the natural instinct to jump in and immediately fix the problem. I know it's hard, but reflexive phrases like, oh, it's fine, or instantly pivoting to the calendar to say, hey, we'll get them next time, well, they usually come from a really good place, but they actually end up invalidating what your child is feeling in that exact moment. Frankly, they don't want to hear about next time when they're hurting right now. Instead, try this. Here's a very simple script you can just steal. I can see you're disappointed. That's it. This directly tells them their emotions are completely valid right now. It gives them the actual space to feel the disappointment without you trying to artificially rush them past it. Moving on to section 2, connection before correction. Once you've acknowledged their feelings, it's all about following up with a message that remains deeply supportive. You want to acknowledge the pain, sure, but anchor your message in what truly matters. Something like, it hurts when you work so hard and don't get the result you wanted, and I'm proud of the way you showed up. This is huge. It completely detaches their intrinsic value from a judge's score. It reassures them without erasing the very real reality of the loss they just went through. Think about the stark contrast between a defensive question and a supportive prompt. Asking, why didn't you try harder, immediately raises their shield, right? It puts them on the defensive. On the flip side, a supportive prompt like, what part felt best, encourages a healthy internal reflection. It actually builds them up rather than tearing them down. You can really constructively steer the conversation by asking questions that spark new ideas. Ask things like, what part felt best? Or what did you learn from that routine? Or even, how did it feel in your body when you made that turn? This taps into how their heart felt and plants the seeds for future growth. It reminds them of the physical joy and the personal learning experience they had out there, totally regardless of whatever medals were handed out at the end. Okay, that brings us to section 3, praising the process. This is where we shift the narrative away from the emotional aftermath and really start talking about effort and growth. For a lot of kids, losing triggers a super heavy cloud of negative thoughts. You know the ones. I'm not good, or I'll literally never improve. It is just so dangerously easy for them to internalize a single isolated loss as a permanent character flaw or like a hard ceiling on their potential. And as supportive adults, our job is to actively but gently counter this exact mindset. So how do we counter those negative thoughts? We do it by pointing directly to the things they can actually control. We're talking about hitting their targets in practice, solid preparation, listening closely to coaching, and overall consistency. By shifting their focus right back to these actionable behaviors, you take their mental energy away from the uncontrollable judging and put it right back into their own hands. A great way to frame their journey is by explaining this concept. A result is really just a frozen moment in time. It's like a stopped clock. But progress? Well, progress is a living, growing thing. It's built from many, many moments of hard work, blooming over the entire season. This framing helps them zoom out and actually see the bigger picture of their own development. Now, sometimes kids will complain about fairness or just obsess over very specific mistakes they made. If that happens, use a simple 2-step pause and pivot technique. First, pause and acknowledge it without dwelling. Say, you're right, there was a moment where it didn't land. Then pivot straight to action. Let's figure out 1 or 2 things we can practice to make it stronger. See? It keeps the whole conversation balanced and always looking forward. And that naturally builds into our final section, identity beyond the dance. This is where we reinforce who they are outside of just being a competitor. After the raw emotions have fully settled down, you want to gently shift toward a concrete next step. Asking what's one thing you want to work on next is incredibly powerful. Seriously, it invites their input, so the practice plan doesn't feel like it's just being imposed by a disappointed parent. Whether they want to work on accuracy, timing, or just confidence, setting a small target together entirely restores their sense of agency. You might want to try implementing what we call the practice plus approach. Instead of an exhausting all-or-nothing mindset, just set up one weekly focus area, say cleaner footwork. Then pair that with one confidence-building routine, like running the dance with music and steady breathing. The goal here is to celebrate the completion of these small, totally achievable goals rather than demanding perfection. At the end of the day, competition results absolutely do not define your child's character. You need to remind your child that a single performance is just the surface level. What you deeply, truly value are the strong roots they are growing beneath it all. Their effort, their discipline, their resilience, and their kindness to the other competitors. That's the real win. Here is another fantastic script to steal if you find they are really upset with themselves. You're a dancer and dancers improve. It steers them right back to their brave identity. It reminds them that improving is literally part of the job description of a dancer or any athlete, and that their courage under high pressure is what truly matters. However, as we start to wrap up these strategies, it is absolutely vital to keep a close eye on your child's overall well-being. Please watch for prolonged morning signs of distress. We're talking about things like disruptions in their sleep patterns, a noticeable drop in appetite, or a sudden persistent fear of practicing. If this kind of distress lasts, it might indicate it's time to involve a trusted instructor or even a counselor to help them feel safe trying again. Ultimately, what you should take away from this explainer is that a losing day doesn't have to be a disaster. Not at all. It can be a pivotal turning point where your child learns that disappointment is just a normal, temporary part of growth. So the next time that scoreboard really hurts, ask yourself, will you let the final results define their day? Or will you use this exact moment to teach them that their own determination is the light that truly carries them forward?